Welcome back. We continue with our focused and non-stop coverage of what's really happened in Kozhikode, that horrific accident of the Air India Express aircraft. In fact, that has claimed 19 lives. There are several people who have been injured, who continue to be injured, are recuperating right now. There are 14 passengers at least who are critically injured. Neetu Regokumar, my colleague, is getting us more on that story. She joins us from Thiruvananthapuram, and also joining us on the broadcast this morning is Jitender Bhargava. He's the former ED of Air India. Thank you for your time here. Neetu, first to you, a quick update. All right, we'll go across to Neetu in a bit from now, but I'm going to bring in Jitender Bhargava, the former ED of Air India. Thank you for your time here, sir, again. I want to ask you about this particular runway considered to be the riskiest in India, and it's what happened last night is eerily similar to what happened in the year 2010 also at the Bangalore tabletop airport, which also led to a crash eventually. What do you make of how safe these tabletop airports are, and what really should be done to improve the situation, given the fact that all of us know it's problematic?
Tabletop airports are world over, and per se, they are not unsafe, though they are described as critical airports, and pilots are given specialized training for landing, taking off from such airports. So to blame the airport wouldn't be a correct thing. There are certain deficiencies in the runway, the airport, I would say. I wouldn't disagree. For example, on the runway 10, on which the pilots landed yesterday, is it equipped with ILS? Question mark. Were the center line lights functional? Question mark. We need answers to those queries. There's no denying that it was inclement weather, waterlogging on the runway, which made the conditions unsafe. But did the pilots touch down at the threshold of the runway, or did they do it 2,000–3,000 feet ahead of it? Because with the airport length being 9,000 feet, where even jumbos land, which require a much longer runway, the 737-800 had adequate space for landing if only the touch point had been the threshold of the runway, so that you got about 6,000. And the other aspect is, as experts are indicating, people from Calicut are indicating, he landed from the direction in which he had the advantage of tailwind. So that added to the speed, and that is why the aircraft overshot. There are a lot of things which will emerge now that the black box is available, the cockpit voice recorder is available. Once they're decoded, we'll know the real facts as to what happened. The first go round, the second one, and he changed the runway to land at runway number 10. Now, was it a wise decision? Now, all these things will emerge when the conversation between the pilot and the co-pilot, pilot and the ATC, etc., are made known. But the fact is, it's an unfortunate accident. The second one in the 15-year history of Air India Express. The previous one was also on a tabletop airport at Bangalore. So there are a lot of commonalities, and I believe a lot of similarities will emerge as more facts are known.
Yes. Then the question is, could have those 19 deaths really been avoided? What about the maintenance of the runway? Questions being asked about water stagnation at the runway and turn pad, cracks across and along the runway also. Excessive rubber deposit on the runway. These are questions that have to be asked about the proper maintenance then of this particular stretch.
I would hate to speculate at this stage. There is no denying that we have a chalta hai attitude in our work culture. Now, the second point compounding the whole issue is India's regulatory agency, the DGCA. For how long will government trust the Indian Administrative Service officers to help it? You need a technical person. You need somebody who is familiar, who is conversant with the nitty-gritty of airport or airline management. Yes. Now, you simply cannot have a regulatory agency headed by a person who is good at file work, but does not know the things which are necessary to be known regarding the ground realities. Now, airport authority again. Now, if people have to raise fingers and say the Calicut runway was unsafe, the question is, was the pilot cautioned about it? Yesterday's condition particularly, if waterlogging was there and the center line, which the line which is there had faded, or the central line lights were not functional, all these facts have to be known so that a pilot becomes conscious about it and takes a call. He cannot take a call what he would do it in a day condition, in a night condition, and in night condition compounded by inclement weather, waterlogging, etc. So there are multiple factors. As I said earlier, let's keep the facts to this stage. Let the more facts emerge based on the CVR and the black box, and then we'll know what to do it. But then one plea comes out. The government has already instituted, as is provided in the law, an investigation board which will look into all the facts. But when the report is submitted, the recommendations are made. The question to be asked of DGC and the Ministry of Civil Aviation is, do you heed to those recommendations and take corrective action? The past experience does not give you the requisite confidence that they do act on it.
Absolutely. You know, you've spoken about the fact that may this be an eye-opener, but unfortunately, I don't know what sort of an eye-opener will it really be, because way back in 2011, also the Aviation Advisory Panel had spoken about the buffer zone of this particular tabletop airport runway being inadequate. Also, the other suggestions was that space on either side should be 100 meters, not 75 as is the case. Operational curbs and special procedures are required. Were any of these warning signs looked at? Were any of the instructions or advice really adhered to in terms of doing the needful to make this particular stretch, this runway, safer, sir?
You see, as I said, the chalta high attitude, they don't take heed to the suggestions given. But in this particular case, I wouldn't fault the runway for it, for the simple reason the recommendation made for the largest kind of aircraft that is operating at Calicut Airport, which is the jumbo 747-400s. Now, this 737-800 aircraft requires a much shorter runway, much shorter width. The wingspan is much shorter. It's a smaller aircraft. So I wouldn't allude to the 2011 recommendation, which would have been made keeping in view the largest aircraft operating at Calicut Airport. But this particular accident, I wouldn't say that the runway was short in length, because this 737-800 requires no more than 5,000, 6,000 feet for landing. And this length being 8,800 feet was good enough if only the aircraft touchdown point had been closer to the beginning of the runway and not some 2,000, 3,000 feet ahead of the beginning of the runway.
Yes. You know, sir, you did mention that one should not be blaming the runway because there are tabletop runways across the world. Just tell us, what are the kind of safety precautions that are required to ensure that in India we do the needful to ensure that these runways and there are more than one, there's more than one runway, in fact, of this nature in the country. There are more, of course. What can we do to make them safer? And also do give us an idea about the number of similar runways in the country. Where all do we have tabletop runways in India?
You see, you have it in Leh, for example, then you have it in Northeast, the runway Mangalore, of course, closer to it. So wherever you do not have a plain surface adequate, you've chopped off the top of the mountain and made a runway on it.
Right.
So there are examples world over, but as I said earlier, the pilots are trained accordingly, keeping in view. And this is why airports like the one in Calicut are described as critical airports. They feature in the list of critical airports, and the airlines are advised to train people accordingly. So I wouldn't, as I said again, one can always find faults with it, but what was needed by yesterday in this particular case was, if the weather was inclement, if there was water logging on the runway, then ATC ought to have alerted the pilot on it.
Yes, you know, I'm just wondering because one of the reasons, of course, is the inclement weather there. We've been seeing rains for a while now in the state of Kerala, in this particular area also. I mean, was that really so difficult to do, to divert this particular aircraft, or to say landing is not possible, land somewhere else, and this is going to be delayed for a while? I mean, this is just about logistics, isn't it?
You know, it is. The pilot made the first attempt to land on the other runway, 2A. It was subsequently, after he went through a go-round, he landed on runway number 10. Now, he could have certainly said, look, I'm not going to be attempting a landing at Calicut Airport, but I'll go to either Kochi or Trivandrum Airport, which are not very far away. And there's always adequate fuel provided in the aircraft for an alternate airport they could have done. But the final call is always of the commander. He takes a call whether I must land or not. In this case, perhaps his decision has gone wrong on it. Or, as I said earlier, the speed factor. The second is where he touched down on the runway are all critical factors that contributed to it. One can be expecting that, look, 9,000 is a long airport, runway, I'll be able to stop the aircraft, but your decision has gone wrong. Now, this is what will emerge finally when the report is done. As I said earlier, let's not speculate the reasons. We're only giving it out what is available in public domain at the moment, or what people who were eyewitness to it, or people who are currently at Calicut are sharing that this is what is it. But let's hope these things are not repeated. As I said, once the recommendations are made, let them be heeded too. Government taking critical action on expeditiously, and then ensuring that our skies are safe. We can't have accidents. Say, for example, Air India Express, as I said, in its 15-year history, that's the second accident.
All right. Thank you so much for your perspective on that, Jitender Bhargava, former ED of Air India, with his very valuable perspective and inputs on that important story that we are tracking, that horrific air crash which has killed 19 people. The investigations are currently underway. Details of that report, that interview and much more up on our website as always. That's news18.com. With that, it's time for a quick commercial break here.